Hi, I'm Brandon Acker, and in today's video, I'm going to be answering the 10 most common questions I get about this instrument, the Theorbo. Number 1. How many strings does it have? In the Baroque period, 1600 to 1750, the Theorbo was a very popular instrument, and typically it had 14 strings. The first 7 strings, which are closer to the ground, are played just like a guitar. You can play chords and nice melodies, and you fret them with your left hand. Those strings are attached to the first peg box, which is just kind of like a guitar, but we use friction pegs like a violin or a cello. And then we have these floating strings, these really long floating strings, which travel all the way to a second peg box up here. And so when I play this instrument, I typically think about it as 2 separate instruments. The top part, which is sort of like a guitar, and then the bottom part, which is almost like a harp. Number 2, how is it tuned? I really think of the Theorbo as 2 separate instruments sandwiched into one. The top 6 strings, A, D, G, E, A, I think of as one part, sort of a guitar, and then we basically have a harp on the bottom. G, F, E, D, C, B, A, G. It starts off as being very similar to a guitar. A, D, G, B. That's the 5th, 4th, 3rd, and 2nd string of a guitar. But then where it gets interesting is rather than going to another high E, we have a low E. So the top 2 strings are down the octave. We call that a reentrant tuning, and is a very cool thing because it allows us to do beautiful effects called campanella. Then again, I think of the long strings as almost a separate instrument, like a harp. And this is tuned just like a scale. Currently it's tuned like the white keys of a piano. G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And we play that only with our thumb on the right hand. And these super low bass notes, which are great, they sound so strong, are wonderful because we can use them however we'd like. For example, if I was playing a passage that sounded like this, I could do the same thing, but I could make use of these low basses to get a big sound. Now, depending on what key I'm playing in, I can retune these basses. Of course, I have to take the instrument off to retune. Often I get asked, how in the world are you going to reach the second peg box? It's impossible. Well, I can't, so I have to take the instrument off. And what I do is, for example, if I want to take the F and make it an F sharp, I show myself F sharp, and then I retune. To F sharp. And now in the bass I have a G major scale. G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. Question 3, why aren't you playing the top strings? One of the most common questions I get is, why am I not touching and playing and making use of all of these long strings here that are floating? Well, I think it's because people are looking at the wrong hand. They think that I have to touch them in my left hand, but we never touch these long basses with our left hand because they're just open, just like a harp. Instead, if you look at my right hand, you'll see that I'm often playing these notes, but I'm just reaching down and plucking them open. So for example, if you watch my right hand, especially my thumb, see I'm often reaching down and just playing open basses. And so that way my left hand is actually doing very simple things because my thumb is taking care of all these basses. Why is it so big? The Theorbo is definitely impressive to see. It's about 6 feet long, so if I put it on the ground next to me, I'm about 5'11", and you can see it's as tall as I am. So why is it so big? So we have to know a little history here. The Theorbo was invented around 1580 in Italy, and at the time there were lots of different types of lutes. That's bowl-back instruments like this. So you can see it has a round bowl back, just like an oud, and the top is a teardrop shape. So that comes from the Arabic oud, And basically what they did in Europe was, in the Renaissance, lutes became so popular of different sizes and tunings. And this, the instrument from here to here, is basically the bass lute that they developed in the Renaissance, a big lute. And then as we approach 1600, we start entering the Baroque era, people had this idea to invent a new style of music, nuove musicae, where it was going to be very bass heavy, voice singers supported by a nice bass instrument. And they thought the lute needs more bass. So what they did was they started adding more and more bass strings, but with the instrument that's only this long, the strings don't sound very good. And that's because of the string technology at the time. They used gut strings or sheep intestine strings. These strings here are made of sheep intestine. And they have a fantastic sound. But to have the bass notes sound good, you have to make them long. So they kept experimenting by making the instruments longer and longer and longer until they developed the second neck, where the strings is basically double the length of the instrument. And that's what gives the string such nice projection. Next most common question is, how do you transport this thing? So that 6-foot long Theorbo fits in this case, which is only half as long as the instrument. How? Because it folds in half. I should mention that not all Theorbos can fold, but there's a maker named Klaus Jakobsen who made my Theorbo, who invented this mechanism, and it's wonderful for flying, for getting in cars, because my first Theorbo could not fold, and it had a giant case, and it's very challenging to get on the train or a cab. So basically the way it folds is I have this metal cylinder, and I put that over the top of these bass strings here. It goes over the top and through a little slot, like so. Now the bass strings are going to fold around the metal cylinder. And now the strings can fold. This is the scary part. And as you can see, the strings are now folded around the cylinder, and the instrument is just fine. The strings did not break, the instrument is not broken, but it can fit very easily now in my case. You might be thinking that this is going to be terribly out of tune now, but the amazing part is that when I unfold the instrument, surprisingly the strings are still in tune. It's really a genius invention. Is your instrument really 400 years old? No, my instrument is not actually from the Baroque period. It's not an original. This is a replica made in the last 10 years by a maker in London. Luthiers, as we call them today, people who build different types of lutes and violins as well. They can make beautiful replicas by studying the original instruments. They study the woods, the measurements, and then they make a beautiful replica. So this is a replica of an original instrument. Where can you buy one? Unfortunately, Theorbos are not popular enough that you can walk into a standard music store and get one. They are still pretty esoteric, but more and more people are playing them, and so hopefully they'll become more popular. But today the easiest way to get one is to buy it used. I'll put a link in the description where you can check out a page where people often post these instruments for sale. And of course you can also commission a luthier like the one who made this instrument, Klaus Jakobsen, to make you one. How did you learn to play it? You can actually go to various universities, especially in Europe, but also in North America, to study Theorbo. Personally, my degrees are in classical guitar. That's where I did my studies. And then after, I started getting into these instruments, and I just found people who played them, professionals who were touring through my city, and I would just take lessons from them. I also just started playing professionally with groups immediately, and I learned how to play it really on the job. And also, you study the treatises, these old writings of the people of the time in the Baroque period, mostly the 17th century. You look at paintings for sort of suggestions of how they might have held the instrument and plucked, and all that together basically teaches one to play the instrument well. Sometimes in my videos, people ask me why the frets are spaced unevenly. So looking at the fretboard, we actually have the same material as we do for the strings. They're made of gut, and they're just tied around the fretboard. And we can actually take these frets and move them, which is kind of a surprising thing for anybody who plays guitar with fixed metal frets. These can just slide in place, and we can replace them. We can tie on new ones when they wear out. But what's super cool is we can actually move them in very specific ways to change what's called the temperament or the tuning system and play more in tune. So rather than thinking about these old instruments as being crude, in many ways they're actually more sophisticated than modern instruments. Is it difficult to play? I get comments on my videos sometimes. People say, I can barely play my 6-string guitar. How can you possibly play 14 strings? At first, it seems like there's just a forest of strings, and how am I ever going to play these notes accurately? But actually, people at the time invented this instrument not to make their lives more difficult. They made it to play Baroque music in an easier way. So having all these strings really does make playing the music from the time easier. And if you think about it, the left hand has to do very little because the right hand thumb is playing the bass notes, which frees up the left hand to move wherever it wants. As opposed to on a guitar, if you want this low C, but you want to play a very high note, you have to make very big stretches. On this one, you can just play a low C and then play a high note, but just with one. Thanks for watching this video. I hope it helped you learn more and appreciate the beautiful Theorbo. If you want to hear more or learn more about it, I have lots of videos on my channel performing on this instrument, solo, with singers, and an orchestra. Also, please check out the description of my video because there are various links to educational resources. For example, if you're trying to learn classical guitar, I have many guitar courses you can take online. I also have an online music school where you can study Theorbo, so you can take your own private lessons with an expert on Theorbo, as well as various other instruments like classical guitar, electric guitar, etc. And lastly, if you're enjoying my videos and just want to support the channel, please take a look at my Patreon, where I offer behind-the-scenes clips, extra content just for them, guitar tips and things like that. So please take a look there, and I'll see you next time.